The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Deltaee team here from Edinburgh in the really cold first winter days of Scotland. I'm here with my colleagues David and Kitty, and myself is Arthur Joannick. We are going to talk today about the topic of behavioral science in the energy industry and how we can apply this to better engage, retain, and acquire customers. So we have recently published a study on this topic, and this webinar will be to explore some of the findings we've had, get some discussions going with you all. If you have any questions, we really want to share some what we think is interesting around this space, and we hope that this format will be great for you. We will be about 45 minutes long. We hope to talk for about 30 minutes and then allow for some questions from your side. There will be a few polls as well toward the end to get your opinion on what we have discussed. And always happy to follow up afterwards if you want to continue the discussion. So please email us, call us, come to visit us, and we can have discussions around the topic. So let's get started. Just to reintroduce the team here. It's myself, Arthur, and my colleagues David and Kitty, who actually do most of the hard work of the research. Hi, David. Hi, Kitty.
Hi.
Hey.
And basically, this team has been working together for a year or two now, looking at how we can create value from data and energy, customer data and energy data to really help energy companies and the whole energy industry to better make decisions around customer strategy. You will see at the bottom a few reports we recently published on that topic. So behavioral science being one of them, but also monetizing smart meter data, energy insights propositions across Europe and beyond. So how to really understand what's happening, what we could do, and how my company could benefit from this as well. So this is what our team is doing 24/7. And we hope we can add some value today as well via this webinar. A few things for today. So for those of you who are not familiar with the software and the way we do webinars, so a few things. On the right-hand side, you will see the user interface. So basically, you can add questions in the question box at the bottom right. And we are currently monitoring some questions or even comments if you want. And we will either ask the questions during the webinar towards the end or follow up with you afterwards if we didn't have time to go through it. We have a Deltaee YouTube channel on the left-hand side. That's a screenshot of that channel. So you can watch the webinars we have recorded in the past. So this one will be made available later on today. And the slides can be made available on PDF as well, and we can send it to you. So plenty of opportunities to interact and look at what the content is or watch again the webinar. In terms of the themes of this webinar, so behavioral science applied to energy is quite an interesting thought when you think about it, because it's not something that everyone is usually talking about. But our team here is really trying to focus on how to create value for specifically, but not only energy suppliers. We want to engage, retain, create more value, and acquire more customers. And after looking at a lot of these topics, after talking with the industry, after hosting a specific summit on the digital energy topic, we've got a lot of questions around, actually, it's very expensive to bring customer insights solutions, software, hardware, but are they better, cheaper solutions or alternatives to create some value for customers or help them make better decisions? And more people are talking about behavioral science as a way to do this in a quicker and simpler way. So what we have done in the last few months is digging into this topic really much, talking to the industry, talking to other industries, to try to understand how we can which techniques we can use to apply to the energy industry. So some of the things that behavioral science help us with, it's obviously understand customers a bit better, but not only, we can also influence the decisions the customers will take for their own benefits, for the benefits of the company doing this, and drive business and customer value. So it's really about trying to create better services for customers while doing some simple techniques to help them, to guide them towards this, really. And this can be applied across the life cycle of the customer. So right from the start, when we are at the acquisition process, in comparison websites or in other places, but also towards the billing process, towards the retention mechanism that we apply, maybe to try to help customers spend more money on your company. And it's not only used by one part of the company, it's different parts of each company that can use different techniques to help achieve a lot of value. And what we have seen so far is that a lot of companies are doing a little bit of this, but it's hardly coordinated across companies. So what we will show in this webinar is a lot of examples on how companies are currently using behavioral science to drive basically business metrics for the energy industry. And a brief summary of what we do. I mean, most of you, from what we see, know what we do, but it's always helpful to understand where we come from. So Deltaee, we are a research and consulting business focusing a lot on the knowledge side of things. And our mission is to transition from old energy to new energy. And here you will see some of what we mean by old to new. In the case of energy supplying and customers, it's really making the transition from customers being a meter point, and now the customers being actually a person which we offer services, which we try to understand a bit better. And it's how we can better help you make the transition with better information and therefore make better informed decisions. The range of clients we work for, we work across the energy industry and beyond. So it can be energy companies, it can be tech companies, services companies, etc. You will see a list of clients we work for there. And as I said, we are a mix of consulting and research, which means we do one-on-one work for our clients, but also multi-client subscription services, which is what this team is doing on the customer data value side of things. And specifically, our positioning within this whole new energy transition is to better make the links between the different sides of the industry that matter. So while we understand a lot about renewable energies, distributed, decentralized energies, there is a big focus on how to digitalize the customer relationship. And that means better transactions, better interactions with customers, providing a lot of insights to customers and insights about customers back to the company. It's about providing services that are digitalized. It's providing platforms where customers can make better choices. It's all linked to each other. And this particular team here with Kitty and David is focusing on how we can create more engagement, looking at the electricity consumption, the disaggregation of it, what energy suppliers are doing with customer engagement, looking at customer attitudes, etc., etc. And that is really a good position for us to be in when we couple this with other areas of research, which, for example, are home services or online boiler sales platform marketplaces. And this helps us join the dots between all the industries. And we do believe it's really important to get the full picture to, again, make better informed decisions. So this is where our teams focus on today. And we hope that positioning is really helping you as a company to make better decisions. So in the next 35 minutes, we are going to talk about specifically this behavioral science topic. We have divided that in three main areas: acquisition, engagement, and the retention of customers. And David and Kitty are going to talk about a few examples coming out of our research to show you how this can be applied to the energy industry. And at the end, a bit of a discussion and Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions and comments in the question box at any time, and we'll monitor this and get back to you on this.
Right, so we'll get on with the content now. To begin with, I'm just going to start by giving a very high-level overview of what behavioural science actually is, before we then discuss how it can be applied. So to begin with, behavioural science basically tries to identify the reasons behind our actions and what affects how we behave and the decisions that we make. Underneath, you can see it says two-system thinking, nudges, and habit formation. These are three key tenets of what is an increasingly broad field of research, but they underlie many of the key thinking that we have found. So two-system thinking refers to the automatic system and the reflective system. The reflective system is what we tend to associate with thinking. So when making a decision with the reflective system, it is far more rational and analytical. You will look at all the options available and weigh up the pros and cons. It's very energy intensive from a thinking perspective, and completely ineffective if we had to make every decision using this method. So the body, as an efficiency mechanism, really uses much more the automatic system for everyday decisions. The automatic system is much more related to simple decisions, such as if I was to say 2 + 2, you automatically think 4, rather than if I was to say 37 × 23, which most people would not be able to do just off the bat. With behavioral science, the idea is to influence the automatic system and guide decisions that way, in far more, to place far more emphasis on that. So habit formation is one example where the automatic system takes prominence. When you start a new routine, it's often arduous. You really have to think about it. Say you decide that you want to take up jogging. At the beginning, you're going to have to set the alarm, you're going to have to plan your route, you're going to have to buy trainers and running equipment, and it will be much more difficult for you to do. But the more you do it, the more automatic it will become. So when your alarm goes off, you automatically get dressed for the run, you do the run, and you'll receive a reward for doing that, either consciously or unconsciously, just by feeling good. And nudges are a key part of behavioral science, whereby you change the decision environment in such a way as to make certain decisions more likely than others. A key part of nudging is that you do not coerce people into making certain decisions. They still have exactly the same choices as before and freedom to make those choices, but you just nudge them in a certain direction. So here's an example. Here's an example of a nudge that's proven rather effective in certain subway stations. Just 2 simple stickers on the floor, one thin, one less thin. And via this nudge, you encourage people to consider which group of people they would like to belong to. And what was found with this study is it led to far more people taking the stairs. People prefer to think of themselves as healthy, as thin, as making better choices, and so chose the path that they thought better associated with that. So that's a very brief, very quick, high-level overview of behavioral science. So why is it important? What we found in our research is that behavioral science thinking is being increasingly adopted in other sectors to great effect. In particular, we're seeing the likes of GAFA, so Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, using these techniques, and also financial service companies who have found them very effective in encouraging early bill payment and repayment of credit card debt. So whilst it's been effective in other sectors, we think it can be similarly effective in energy. And it's also a way of very quickly influencing customer behavior. It can be used for short-term targets, longer-term targets by improving customer engagement, and can also be implemented at relatively low cost and low risk. So these are all reasons to consider it in your strategies. And here are some of the key principles that we have found are being used. Certain ones to take note of here are that customers particularly respond to incentives, and these are not necessarily positive, but also can invoke what's called loss aversion. People really don't like what they already have to be taken away from them. And invoking these emotions can be very effective. This is one reason why defaults or the status quo are selected far more than when people are forced to make a decision. Also important to note are that what other people do is really important. We are massively influenced by those around us, by those we admire, and we will make decisions that encourage us to fit into that group, rather than by necessarily weighing up all the pros and cons. And finally, we're very sensitive to how things are framed. Different pricing strategies can cause us to perceive things as being more or less expensive. A good example here would be people are far more likely to buy a product with no shipping costs, even if they could buy the same product cheaper with added shipping costs. So same price overall, but the no shipping cost framing is far more effective. So these are just a few examples, and we will be discussing these throughout the webinar and drawing your attention to them as and when appropriate. Just to give a few examples relevant to the energy sector, these are some of the more visual ones we have found on offer from companies across Europe. One example would be this price comparison website, which makes it very salient what customers will be paying and to what extent that energy can be considered green. So it very quickly and very simply for customers lays out their options in a way that will resonate and make certain choices more likely. A second option would be this review. Customers are, as I mentioned, very heavily influenced by what those around them say and do, especially if they consider themselves to be like the other person. So framing things in terms of positive reviews, the messenger effect can be very influential on customer decisions. So that's a very brief overview of behavioural science and how it's currently being used. And I will now pass over to my colleague David to talk more about its use in acquisition.
Great, thank you. So yes, customer acquisition is key for any energy company, whether they're in a growth phase or even if they're focused on retention, as attracting new customers offsets those customers you're losing. Behavioural science can actually help in either of those two strategies, and there are various pricing and non-pricing techniques that can help us. So I'll talk first about some of the pricing-led practices. The most obvious and common is price comparison, which is used by many challenger brands, price comparison websites, and energy switching services, for instance. The concept here is, of course, to compare your brand's price in a favourable light compared to a reference point, which may be a market leader, a key competitor, or anything else that puts you at a cost advantage, so consumers see you as less expensive and better value for money. Price reframing is another example, which actually tries to move away from actual cost and price and move more towards value for money. And the concept here really is just trying to shift that perception in consumers' eyes. So examples could be actually focusing rather than on cost, could be focusing on the discount that you offer, an added value option like a warranty, for instance, that helps build up the value criteria that you offer. Or sometimes just changing the language from rather than the cost per year, what's the cost per month, cost per week or per day, for instance. One interesting example is Nest. They've actually moved away from looking at the cost of their product and actually reframing that to say actually how much a household could actually save on their energy bills by buying their product. And then the third area, or third sort of pricing technique, is around simplification of price. When we're presented with a lot of choice, sometimes that can overwhelm us, and actually we end up not making a decision at all. So actually simplifying that and removing those obstacles makes that decision-making process easier. And there are two ways sort of within that to achieve that aim. One is by actually reducing the number of price points, maybe the number of products that you offer to be able to make that decision process easier. And the second way is to have a clear difference between the various products and the prices within there. Because then people will automatically assume a level of quality when there's a price jump to the next model, for instance, that you offer. So these are some of the key sort of pricing techniques that can be used for customer acquisition. There are obviously some non-pricing elements as well, because after all, we don't all make our decisions based purely on price, but actually we consider other things as well. The first of these is really focusing on our brand strengths and values. This really taps into the sort of power of social norms around differentiators of scale or trust or customer service. So people want to follow the crowd, make sure they're not the only one doing something. So those sort of reassurances can help influence decision making. So signposting scale through sort of customer numbers, trust through expert or peer reviews, for instance, can help here. And awards for customer service is another interesting one. What's quite interesting is how this is being played out in France as a particular example in the energy supplier market. So you have EDF as the dominant market player, market leader, and Direct Energy as a challenger brand. So Direct Energy will have a big line about their energy savings that they can and cost savings against EDF. So discounts up to 10% on the state tariff, an online savings calculator. Whereas EDF will look more about the social identity, the national identity, in fact, inherent in their name, or their sponsorship of the national football team. What's particularly interesting here is actually that Direct Energy don't just rely on the cost elements, but also dial up some of these non-pricing practices as well. So they look at their customer reviews and show that. They look at their scale by quoting the number of customers they have. And they also mention the customer service award they have, all trying to sort of dent the dominance there of EDF. Another example is to look at consumer shortcuts. We don't all spend hours making every decision, so leveraging those shortcuts to help influence those decisions can be very helpful. We've already discussed a lot of examples already that sort of would come under this, but other examples could include things like default settings to paperless billing or a partially completed online quote form, for instance. Or breaking out a commitment from a customer into small steps, like a 3 steps or home move journey, to make things easier for them and encourage them to make that step. And then the third area is around lead generation. And this can be done in different ways, but it's around saving customers time and effort, perhaps by offering them something in exchange for their contact details to follow up with, as an example, or actually engaging your customers, your most satisfied customers, to act on your behalf for lead generation or sales through online referral schemes, as an example. So these we looked at sort of 6 categories here of acquisition. So let's now turn our attention through to customer engagement.
Thank you, David. So behavioural science can be used to improve customer engagement from the moment they've onboarded, really. First impressions are critical, as studies have shown that customers will recall the initial interaction, the final interaction, and anything that's particularly extreme in between. Unfortunately, that often is negative. But if you're able to create extreme positive experiences, customers will really recall these. So the first 100 days are crucial, both for creating positive customer sentiment towards your brand and also for establishing preferable behavioural patterns. So examples of this could be paperless billing. This can be beneficial for companies as it greatly reduces cost to serve, but it can also be beneficial to customers as they don't have to deal with a ton of paper in their homes. We have found that customers are susceptible to nudging towards paperless billing, largely through making it a default option, and also by making the choice as simple as possible. So EDF Energy found that by simplifying the customer journey from 5 clicks down to 2 and automatically inputting a lot of customer information led to paperless billing selection far higher than previously. You can also encourage customers to engage via more digital channels by making these particularly prominent in any customer communications. If it's very easy for the customer to find an email address to contact, or maybe if the website has a chat bot, these will be used far more than if they have to expend a considerable amount of time and effort trying to find a phone number, say, or an address. So these are 2 ways to encourage customers towards more digital communications, and also work in their benefit. If they are able to be seen and dealt with as quickly as possible, that is to everyone's gain. It's also worth saying that when onboarding a customer, as these are the initial opinion forming stages, it's key to make sure that you have everything right. Just double check with the customer that you have all of their details. Make sure that any future problems that could be avoided are avoided. And massage the customer's ego for choosing your company. When switching, it is often as a result of an undesirable experience elsewhere. So raising points as to why they should switch to you, and just restating these and reframing your offering in comparison to others will reassure them that they have made the right choice and start the journey in a very positive light. So once you've started on the right foot, you can then work on deepening the customer relationship. So one way that this is being done is through the offering of insights propositions. Many energy companies are now offering insight into how customers consume energy, and this is to varying effect. Behavioural science can play a pivotal role in encouraging customers to engage with insights platforms and also to get real value from them. Habit formation here is key. If you can help customers make a routine out of checking energy insights and taking action on them, then they are far more likely to continue to use them. A famous example is from O-Power, who found that a behavioural science technique where they massaged customers' egos according to how they consumed energy relative to their peers led to great reductions in energy consumption. By simply telling people how their energy consumption compared to their neighbours, this led to people that were doing this led to people that were doing badly working hard to improve. And in order to maintain engagement from those that were ahead of their peers, the simple addition of a smiley face next to the chart showing their relative energy consumption was enough to encourage long-term engagement or significant action on this. Behavioral science can also be used to deepen the customer relationship as the energy transition gets underway. We have found that increasingly electric vehicle offers and even domestic demand-side response propositions are coming to market to help companies cope with the changing energy mix. One example of how this can be done is for electric vehicles, for example, leasing batteries has proven far more effective at users allowing their vehicle to be variably charged, probably due to loss aversion that I mentioned before. And likewise with domestic demand-side response, active commitments. So customers saying how and when they will reduce or increase energy consumption have proven far more effective than a simple, yes, I will do this.
And breadth of engagement can also be useful in cross-sell activity, leveraging a lot of the techniques we've already used and talked about in acquisition. So moving on to retention as the third key area. Poor customer service is a key driver of customer churn. Now, most energy companies get the right customer outcomes, good customer outcomes most of the time, but it's really the inconsistencies is where that falls down. And behavioural science can help us deliver on this to recover customer relationships. For instance, it helps us understand the heightened emotion around these moments, as customers see perhaps the outcome rather than necessarily the processes and complexity that sit behind that. They attach greater significance to the peak, or in this case perhaps a low moment in their interactions, and also the last interactions in a series of them. So behavioural science actually helps us understand that, and then helps us then to understand how best to deal with that, both at a personal level in terms of acknowledging, apologising, using empathy to recover that particular customer, but also at a larger scale to actually identify the pain points then that might be relevant to other people. And it's a big piece of work that companies need to do to actually understand where those pain points are and how best to address them using nudges. So that's sort of service recovery. In terms of price rises, particularly in the energy retail space at the moment, is obviously highly important. Price is the main driver of energy supplier switching, and in an environment now of wholesale costs that are rising, energy prices rising are also inevitable. But again, we can build on the techniques we discussed earlier, for instance, around price comparisons. So rather than necessarily price against competitors, you can price yourselves or your price increases against the rising wholesale costs, for instance, increase that transparency to the customer. One example here is Outfox the Market, who actually did still manage to present themselves favourably against their competitor set after their first price rise earlier this year. And then we've got circumstantial reasons for churn as well. So people churn, obviously, we talked about price, we talked about poor service, but also for circumstantial reasons, whether that's a change in income, in household makeup, or other things such as home move. Energy companies probably have the least influence in these three categories in this place. Probably depend on the amount of quality of customer data that they have, but behavioural techniques can still be applied even here to make life as easy as possible for customers to stay with you during this period of change. Some examples might be around in the home move journey, for instance, around priming them with the information needed or the notice period to be able to make a successful home move for them. Looking at reciprocity. So if you provide some home move tips, for instance, for them, you're helping a customer, they might be more inclined to continue with you in a new property. Making the the change as frictionless as possible, perhaps by providing a digital home move tracker for them, or a window to be able to change their tariff, as it won't necessarily be the first thing on their mind at this stressful time. And also leveraging sort of loss aversion again is thinking about, once they've changed tariff, to actually be able to backdate it back to that date of move, for instance, because I say it won't be the first thing they do as they walk through their new property's doors. So that sort of covers the areas of acquisition, engagement, and retention.
And we would like to ask you your opinion, actually, on what you think, or on your opinion about behavioral science. So I'm just going to launch a poll, and if you could just give your opinion on this, and if you want, will you actually give your opinion? If you want to drop a comment in the question box on why you think it has a role to play, or why you think you're absolutely not convinced and you think it's a lot of garbage. So that would be really interesting to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can have a short debate after that. But it's really interesting to see usually what people think about this sort of topic, because it's not natural for, let's say, traditional energy companies to be so customer focused and using such customer techniques. But in this case, we do believe that this can have a lot of impacts, and yeah, so I'll give you 5 more seconds to finish the voting. I think almost everyone has voted. Actually, the results are quite interesting so far. And yeah, please feel free to comment on that. So let me close the poll and to share this with you. So yeah, pretty much actually only 1 or 2 people have said this is a load of garbage, which is encouraging. But pretty much everyone is convinced that this has a role to play, or this actually is quite, it's a must-have basically. But 2/3 of the people on the webinar, which is about 80 people, have said that yes, it has a role to play. So that's quite interesting. And maybe a few questions coming in as well. The first one, in the context of acquisition, many solutions require nearly a year of consumption data before the platform provides personalized insights. So how have you observed any providers effectively addressing the pain points of not having enough data to use for acquisition? David, maybe you want to have a few words on this?
Yes, that's a good question, and obviously it can be a big stumbling block for many energy suppliers. There is one supplier I'm aware of, AGL in Australia, that they actually ask prospects to upload their previous bill, and then they can, in exchange for an accurate online quote, and start the process there. So that's one way of getting around that issue.
Great. Keep firing your comments as we go. We're gonna have another poll just now to ask you another question, actually. So yeah. So again, where do you think actually the energy industry is on this behavioral science journey between, let's say, deeply embedded in the company towards now it's really at early thinking stage, if anything. It will be actually interesting to see a difference between you guys saying that this is quite important to have and this is a must-have versus what's actually happening. So far we can see people voting. It's great. I guess more B and C are the most attractive options so far. If you want to drop your comments as well, that would be quite interesting to say. So yeah, let me give you a few more seconds before we close this and share the poll. 1, 2, 3, let's go. And yeah, here are the results you will see. So most of the people believe that your energy companies are either experimenting or doing a bit of this already. Perhaps what we see happening is the level of coordination within companies itself, whether they have a proper behavioral science strategy with customers, or whether they actually do a few things just because the marketing team has said something and they want to test something, or because they come from another company which had something successful, or they want to copy competitors. So I think it's clear to say that, and we agree with you, that no one is really has an embedded strategy for behavioral science, but we do expect this to change in the future. A quick question from James. What is currently driving energy companies to actually pivot to consumer-focused objectives? That's actually quite an interesting question, and it's a question that everyone is asking in the energy industry. My personal view is that generally in the energy supply business, the margins are reducing. There is increasingly competition, so the churn is increasing. It's really harder and harder to fight for customers. So as we explained, like, it's a lot about how will customers choose your company over others, and not why customers will keep the legacy supplier that they had. And there is also the fact that more and more services can be extracted from customers today, which can be energy, heating, home services, and so on. Or Kitty talked about the electric vehicles. We talked about batteries. There's a lot more we can create value from customers, and therefore having the customer relationship is one of the key aspects of that. And therefore you need to understand how your customers will choose your company in that respect. So please continue firing questions. We have 5 more minutes to answer the questions. Just to, while you are writing your questions and comments, to give you a bit of an overview of how you can access the content we discussed today. That study, actually it's a series of studies on behavioral science, is available in our web portal for paid for subscribers. So if you pay for the subscription, you have access to the studies, you have access to previous studies, and also a lot of case studies on how energy retailers, non-energy retailers are using customer data, are using customer insights, energy insights to create better value for customers. And we really try to analyze all the key questions of this space to help you make better decisions. So perhaps another question. Given that behavioral science nudges messages can be quite different than traditional marketing messages, how have suppliers persuaded marketing teams and agencies to work with this? Thanks, David, for the question. That's actually quite one of the big problems in the energy industry, is to change the ways the internal politics work, who has the power internally, how different teams can work together. I don't know, David, if we have examples of how, or publicly available example of how companies do this, but maybe you can share your thoughts on how the discussions is going on in these companies.
It's definitely an issue, and I think we sometimes need to look outside the energy sector, in fact, because behavioural science, as we saw from the poll, in fact, isn't embedded in the cultures of these companies. And actually, at the moment, they're reliant on partners, and so there are some great partner agencies out there, whether they're sort of specialists in behavioural science from academia or in the commercial world, and they are pervading some of these different areas, whether they be marketing consultancies, design agencies, etc. So they are starting to make inroads there. But I think the centre of gravity hasn't yet shifted internally to have a behavioural science unit, as they are in other industries such as retail.
A quick comment from Joseph, who just said that he changed his telecom provider because of the lack of support when he moved home. So it's really illustrating what we talked about, the retention of customers when changes happen either in the household or even moving home. And it's totally true. And for the energy industry, a lot of the churn is happening when people are moving home, because it's a good time to review your energy contract. You may think that your different location, different house will have different ways of consuming energy, and therefore perhaps having a different energy supplier might help you save money. Another question from Deltae's perspective, which UK power retailer is the most successful in behavior science? So across all the 60 energy suppliers, so we don't want to really favor anyone, but David or Kitty, is there any interesting supplier that you have seen that doing interesting? We're not saying it's the best, we're just saying these are interesting examples.
One new energy supplier, relatively new to the market, that I've been very impressed with is Bulb Energy. Their welcome communications is very friendly in tone, and I found, I mean, I might be biased. They are my energy supplier. But when they had a price increase, they warned me of this possibility months in advance. And then when they did increase prices, they framed it in such a way that I still felt that I was getting the better deal than they were, and almost wanted to say, well, no, you take more. Clearly, you're really struggling to make ends meet. So it was a very clever way of framing the information, very friendly tone to the company, and excellent customer service, all of which have made me feel very favorably towards it, relative to previous suppliers I've had.
So a good example of an energy supplier playing with your brain. Don't know if it's reactive or not. But, a final question, maybe just a question on the report. So the report, cross-sell and upsell, a question is around whether it's only for the energy sector or the principle of cross-selling and upselling in general. Well, actually, it's a bit of both, because the way we approach the research in this team is to look at the energy industry, of course, but the wider industries that are doing a bit better in certain topics, like cross-sell and upsell or like behavioral science, and using these case studies, analyzing them to understand how this can be applied to the energy industry, and then providing the differences between what's being doing in the energy industry versus other industries. So yeah, we really have this bigger picture, non-energy industry picture used for the energy industry, so a bit of both. There are more questions, and I'm sorry we won't have time to answer them, but we will follow up individually afterwards because we are running out of time. But thank you everyone very much for all the comments, questions, engagements. There has been a lot of you guys joining the webinar and the previous webinars. It's really exciting to be exchanging our views with you on these really new, innovating, exciting topics. So I'm really pleased to continue this discussion. In terms of next steps, if you want to have a chat with us, please email or call us. We're always available for a good chat. If you are thinking about subscribing to the research, again, reach out to us. We'll explain to you more in details what it means. In the next few weeks, we'll be attending a few events, the main one being the European Utility Week in Vienna in 2 weeks. So if you are attending, drop us a note and we'll try to meet for a coffee. We'll be really happy to discuss with you. So thanks again for joining. This is recorded. This will be made available on our YouTube channel. The PDF slides will be sent to you if you want to. And once again, a chat with you will be really appreciated and welcome if you want to continue talking about this. So thank you, David. Thank you, Kitty. And thank you all for joining us today. Bye-bye.